Ernie Gibb, welcome to the Barrier Island Center and Conversations in the Kitchen.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me to be here.
We're delighted you could come down from Salisbury today. You have some interesting stories to tell because you were once a resident of this building behind us here at the Almshouse Farm. So,
For a year.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? When did that happen and how did that come about?
I was 5 years old when my parents moved to the Barrier Island Center, or we called it the poorhouse. My father and my uncle together had purchased the poorhouse farm and the house at an auction in Eastville in 1953. And by 1954, we moved to the poorhouse and lived there for a year. At that time, we knew that the house had 12-foot ceilings, and it was difficult to heat with oil stoves. So we closed off the upstairs. The upstairs in the almshouse is, I say it's similar to a college dormitory because there's one long hallway, one bathroom at the end of the hall, and 12 rooms, individual rooms for the people who live there. And I believe that each room inhabited one person. But they were all white at that time. And the black residents, the African Americans, they lived in what's called we called it the low quarters, which is the education building now.
Right. But when you folks moved in, everyone had moved out. It had ceased to function as a poorhouse anymore.
Right. It was owned by the county.
Right.
And the county had closed it.
Now, how big was your family when you moved in?
My brother and me lived here, and I lived here.
So there was,
and with my mother and father.
So there were four
of us, yeah.
with all those rooms. So
we moved from Eastville.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was a rather large building for 4 people to live in. What was that like as a kid? How old were you?
I was 5.
Okay.
But you know, we closed off the stairs and closed off the upstairs to the building. So we only lived on the downstairs, which was half the building.
Okay. Yeah,
We
so...
had a kitchen and all the bedrooms were downstairs.
Right. So too bad, because as a 5-year-old, that would have been a great adventure to have all those rooms to play in. But
Sure.
They closed it off. You were saying earlier, because just to heat that much. And yeah, both floors have very high ceilings. So,
Right.
Well,
we found that it was comfortable to live on the lower level.
Sure. So then, what was that like? Was there anything in the building that was sort of reminiscent of its former use, like when you first moved in there? Was there anything that you kind of had to change to convert it to like a single-family residence?
Well, the heating system was entirely different back in those days. There were several rooms downstairs that had oil stoves that were attached to chimneys, and
so there were little oil stoves, like you would have a fireplace or a wood stove, but it burned oil.
Burned oil. Yeah.
Okay. And there's one of those in each room too.
Not every room, but the rooms obviously where the stove was were warmer than the rooms that did not have an oil stove.
Right.
Yeah. The bedrooms didn't have an oil stove, as I recall.
Right. And did you cook on those stoves too, or
no?
They were separate.
The kitchen, we did all the cooking in the kitchen.
And there was
I can't actually remember where the dining room was, but
maybe you ate in the same room as the kitchen.
I don't think so.
No, separate.
As I remember, the kitchen had a pretty large pantry attached, and that's where my mother did all the cooking.
Yeah. We have some pictures from the 90s when the Barrier Islands Center bought this place and moved in here. And it probably isn't too different. You should look at those because it's probably not too different than when you were living here in the 50s. So you were in, so you were
We
in
moved out in 1955.
55.
And
So,
there were two reasons we moved out. One, that the building was hard to heat at that time, with oil prices were prohibitive. And also my father bought 50 calves to raise on the farm, and somehow the calves got into poison that the county had left here during the 1930s.
oh
And
gosh.
all of the calves died.
Oh my gosh.
So after that happened, and we moved out, my father sold his half interest to my uncle, Frank.
Wow,
And,
what a terrible tragedy, really.
Right.
It must have been, that's like your whole
At
livelihood.
the time, I don't remember anything about the potter's field and humans being buried on the property, but I do know that the calves all died and had to be buried
Huh.
in somewhere in the woods.
Yeah, probably outside of the cemetery area. So, do you have any memories as being a little kid? I guess you must have been. Were you in? Had you started school yet, or?
No, we started in the first grade in those years.
Right. Yeah.
No kindergarten.
Right.
So I have memory of playing cowboys and Indians in the yard.
Mm-hmm.
And
With your brother or neighbors?
with my brother, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. I have a memory of my mother's best friend coming over from Virginia Beach, and they were sitting on a bench. There was a huge tree between the main Bear Island Center building and the low quarters, and so I have a picture somewhere of that, and I can't. I haven't been able to recover it, but I do remember it.
Huh. Yeah, we have some pictures of.
Her name was Bee Cherryman, and my mother and she were close friends because they grew up in Alexandria, Virginia.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I was going to say we have some pictures of the almshouse from that time. You can see those huge trees in the back here. They're none now, but yeah, almost the whole building was shaded.
And as I got older, I had to help maintain the property by mowing grass. And we didn't have any riding mowers at that time. It was all push mowers.
And it wouldn't have been a gas engine either. It would have been the.
Yeah, it was gas.
It was a gas engine.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And my uncle hired me to mow the grass.
Okay.
I remember that.
Well, there's a lot of acres here, but hopefully it was just
It was 19 acres total.
You mowed all 19
No,
acres?
no.
Just around
Just around the house.
Yeah.
Right.
19 acres by hand would be.
The barn was still standing at that time.
Okay, yeah. So the barn was out in this area here toward the front.
To the side.
On the side of the.
Yeah.
Kind
North
of near
side.
the field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And while I was in medical school, I brought one of my friends over here to visit the poorhouse farm. And I remember over 100 little pigs running around. He was amazed since he was not from this area. He's from Long Island. And he was just fascinated by all these little pigs that were being grown here.
So that was the next people who bought it from your. Oh, your
My father sold it to my uncle.
So your uncle had it, and then
It was
your uncle stayed
Dot
here
Gibb's husband. Yes.
for quite a while. So
Yeah.
was he the one raising the pigs, or was just someone?
Yeah, he was the one raising the
Oh,
pigs.
gotcha. Okay, so you were
Yeah.
visiting.
He also raised cattle,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember the barn had stalls in it, which
Mm-hmm.
were used back in the day for mules and horses that were
Right,
on the farm.
right, and presumably back when it was an almshouse too, because that was a working farm
Right.
the whole time.
At some point, and I don't really recall when, the Machapunga Elementary School and the Machapunga, not the Machapunga, but the Northampton County High School,
Right.
which became the middle school in later years, were built on part of the farm property because it was all owned by the county.
Right, right.
And so that took some acreage away from the farm.
Over here, that's the building that's
Towards the seaside, yeah.
no longer used as a
Right.
school anymore, but
Right.
yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
It-
go ahead.
I don't know what use it has now. No.
Uh,
Yeah.
no, I was just curious if you had any other memories of the building or what it was like to live in that structure during that time.
It, at the time, it seemed like a much larger building than it is now. But after my uncle purchased the property, he had traveled all over the world with the Army, and he had collected furniture and objects which he placed in the building to use as storage.
Mm.
He also was a gentleman farmer, and when he harvested soybeans, he would place the beans in he would open up a window and shovel beans into the low quarters, and that's where he would store his beans. And I don't know about corn, but I remember soybeans being in there,
Mm-hmm.
piled up almost to the ceiling.
Right.
Yeah.
So this continued as a working farm, I guess, for 40 years or so until, or was it not?
No,
Did your uncle, was he the only owner besides the Bear Island Center after that?
That's correct.
Okay.
He
Interesting.
maintained the farm.
Yeah.
He used the house for storage.
Right.
And
So you didn't
So-
live here anymore? You just used...
I didn't live here.
No, but your uncle, did your uncle live here still?
No,
or
he lived on another farm, Pine Bluff Farm, which is adjacent to this farm. And it's he had
Right.
120 acres, which is just north of the
Okay.
Bear
So this was
Island
just
Center.
mainly a business at that point, like a farm business, but not
that's
a
right.
residence.
That's
Gotcha.
right.
Okay. So it really
And
was, the building
and-
probably really was in the same basic condition for those 40 years. Those pictures we have from the 90s are probably very similar to what it was in the 40s and 50s.
I remember the access to the farm came from the highway near the John Deere business,
Mm-hmm.
which is north of where the access now.
Yeah, now it's to the south of the property, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main driveway. So I can't recall any other
Well,
information to
That's
tell you.
interesting. I mean, I appreciate you coming down to tell us this stuff because it sort of fills in a little bit of a gap. We've done a lot of research on the history as an almshouse from, early 19th century up until it was sold
I
and
can
you
tell
moved
you-
in, but we didn't know too much about that.
I can tell you about how the farm and the property was sold to the Berry Island Center.
Okay.
My the farm, after my uncle passed away, my aunt of course owned the farm, and it was a lot to upkeep. But my cousin, who was her daughter, her name was Blair Gibb, she instituted the idea to sell it to the Bear Island Center.
Mm-hmm.
And she, at that time, was living in London, England, as she was in charge of Amnesty International office in England.
Mm-hmm.
She, at the time, before she died in 1999, she was dating Peter Gabriel, the singer.
Huh.
They had planned a concert in Paris, France. And then she became ill with leukemia
Oh, dear.
and passed away at the age of 52. But prior to her passing away, she had talked to her mother, Dot Gibb, about selling the property to the Bear Island Center. And that's how it came about.
That's interesting. What I had heard about that story is that there were a number of offers prior to that, but that the Gibb family really wanted this place to be used somehow for the community. Is that correct?
Cultural heritage
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the Eastern Shore.
And so when the Barrier Island Center idea came up, it was sort of a perfect fit.
Yeah, I think at one time there was an idea to make it a house for the homeless in the county.
Okay, which would have been similar to its use as an almshouse.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
But now it's
But
a
that
real,
didn't materialize.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And now it's
So-
a real community center and a community hub, in addition to being a fabulous museum.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you
That's
so much
excellent.
for coming down and filling us in on some of the histories. Anything else you want to add?
No, not that I can recall. Yeah. I don't know. There's been some talk about rebuilding the barn that was here. So I don't know. if
That's the
that'll
first
ever
I've
happen.
heard that. That would be quite
I
a
don't know if that'll ever
project. That would be fun.
happen. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming down today.
Thank you.
I really appreciate
Okay. You're welcome.
all your information.
Uh-huh.